Hi, today I wanted to show you how I made this dress, which was inspired by a Christopher John Rogers dress that I saw that had a very similar but different kind of chest accent square situation, and I thought it was really interesting, and it immediately made me think of log cabin quilt squares, which is what this is. This was honestly a bit of a difficult one for me. I really enjoyed making the actual log cabin quilt squares because I was able to follow a pattern, which I'll link below. I'd never made a quilt square like this before, and it was really fun for me to cut out all the pieces, organize them, and then like watch the square build. But then when I got to the actual dress part, I got a bit frustrated. I did make my own kind of pattern for this, and I was kind of down on myself because I feel like I didn't adequately represent all of the steps for this video because I was figuring out as I was going along. But then I was thinking about it some more, and I feel like my core audience isn't necessarily here for the technical skill. I hope you're here for the inspiration. I know that some of my most viewed videos are the ones where I am talking about more basic fundamentals of sewing. That's not what this project was necessarily started about, the project being the 12 days of DIY. I think I initially did it because I wanted to challenge myself to do a project every day, because I had started a Tumblr that was called a DIY a day, and I was doing a DIY every single day during the summertime, like after I graduated high school. So I'm pretty sure that when I came up with this, and at least the mindset I'm in as I continue to do this series, is I mainly want to inspire you to look at what designers are doing, look at what the trends are, and adapt them to what you want and what your skill set is, and make something instead of buying it. So with all that being said, this is obviously veered a bit from the inspiration, but it is definitely something more suited to my style and what I will wear. Like I said, it was so fun for me to create the log cabin squares, and I feel like I have a bit more knowledge now after figuring out how to create the rest of the dress. So I'm going to do a modified tutorial. I'm going to do some drawings and try to show you how I laid out the pattern pieces and put this together. I hope that you can still take something from it. If nothing else, just go make some log cabin squares. I don't know why it was so fun to me. And I really do like this. I like how this turned out. I think I'm going to probably work on this design and this style a little bit more, maybe come up with a modified version, a more well-executed version in the future. But I'm definitely going to wear this. And that is really what I want to drive home here, is that how fun it is to, if you're interested in fashion and sewing and art, like how fun it is to experience the process. It can be frustrating, but you might end up with something that you really like and you'll use all the time, even if it's not the best made. I think you love it more because you know the work you put into it, and you know it's something that was made just for you. You know you're the only one who has it. I made this dress this summer, which was kind of very similar in the way of trial and error to get to a finish line, and I wore it all the time. Try something new, and here's my semi-tutorial on this Christopher John Rogers inspired dress. So let's start with the log cabin quilt square. I am only using 4 different fabrics instead of a different fabric for every single strip. So it takes a little bit of consideration to decide how you want to do that. Once you do, it's just a lot of cutting. Each strip is a slightly different measurement, and you'll want to make 2 of each one so that you can have 2 squares. The pattern that I used was really easy to follow, and I'll link it down below for your reference. As you can see, there's the pattern, and now I have all of my strips laid out in order of alphabetical, so that now I can just go through and attach them all together like so. So I'm attaching square A to rectangle B, stitching, and then attaching B to C, C to D, and so on. Now that the fun part's over, I'm going to make my first mistake. So I am laying out my, again, recycled shipping packing paper to make a pattern for myself. And my initial idea was to try to use the squares and use them as a guideline for what kind of shapes I need to cut out to form the rest of the dress. So I'm thinking, okay, I'll do like a pointed shape that will just fit in between the squares. So the squares are at the bust, and then this will just get stitched to each square, and this will all come together easily. I realized I didn't need to trace this out on both sides, so I am separating the pieces and just noting that this needs to be cut on fold and cutting out this pointy piece. Then I'm like, okay, what needs to go on the other side? I need to trace another pattern piece for this side. And then I realized, no, you're just making the same piece you already made, just flipped. So I'm like, okay, I'll cut 2 of these pointed pieces not on fold, and those will be the sides. Okay, so let's cut that out, add a bit of seam allowance just off the cuff, which is also not recommended for making clothing that you want to be tailored to your body. You should definitely take a little more consideration. Maybe add the seam allowance to your pattern so that you know it's even, but that's just for future reference. Then, like I said, I am cutting out 2 not on the fold. Now that everything's cut out, I am lining it all up, and I'm going to stitch just down the sides, not on the pointed part. Even though I'm pinning the pointed part in place, I realized I only needed to stitch down each side of this shape that I'm creating. So now I have it all stitched together, which didn't work. I have these V shapes. I can't figure out how to put the squares into them. I don't know. I think I shouldn't have stitched all the panels together and stitched them to the squares first. That might have worked, but instead I just cut off the pointy parts, and I'm going to lay the log cabin squares over a straight seam. Also, in order to make the back side, I just cut the pointy parts off of my pattern and cut 4 pieces out of that pattern and attached them the same way and attached them at the sides to the front. So I'm cutting out 2 squares to match the log cabin squares to be kind of aligning a backing, pinning those right sides together and sewing them almost all the way around, leaving a hole open at the top so that I can turn them inside out. This is also like, I think there was probably a better way to do this, but I'm not sure what it is right now. I think if I had constructed the dress better, I would have just made a lining that covered the whole inside of the dress so that I didn't have to do this. But you live and you learn. So I have the top of the dress here that I cut the pointy parts off of, and I'm just going to turn it over and stitch along the edge so that it has a clean top edge. So now that that is stitched, I am figuring out the placement of the squares, or diamonds as they are. And I'm lucky in that these just are the right size to cover my boobs, but if you have a larger chest, you'll probably have to do a bit of math to scale up the size, either the size of the initial panels that you're cutting and stitching together, or some math to add additional panels onto the squares. But I'm just placing them here in the middle. Basically, right, the center of the diamond is right in line with the top of this skirt part of the dress. It comes together and it will make sense, but I'm going to just stitch straight across that line. Something else that I did that I don't have footage of is follow all of the seam lines of the quilt square with the machine so that it has more of a quilted look. I think if I were to do it again, I would do it by hand so that it just looks a bit cleaner. I have a bunch of black shoelaces from when I worked at a thrift store, so these are coming out again to be the straps. and I am just putting them into the open hole of the quilt square and finagling it, pinning it shut so that it looks clean, and then I'm just going to whip stitch this by hand and also make sure to stitch directly into the lace or the strap for extra security. So here's the situation right now. The dress is too big, and I'm thinking, like, I don't want to have to deal with putting a zipper in, so I think I'm just going to try to take it in just enough so that it still fits over my head without having to do a zipper. So let's see if I can just like clip it on the sides here. So I'm taking off like an inch on each side, maybe. What a dress. So I marked where an inch is, and then I just drew myself a line to follow here on this side seam where it will meet back up with the side, just so it'll be a little tighter fitting at the top. And now, this is a better fit. Now I can just do the straps, and I can still fit it over my head. So we're almost done. Also, in order to determine where the straps should hit or end, I'm going to again take my clip and just like kind of feel like, okay, I think I know I want them to hit about here. So I'm going to clip that on myself, checking the strap length. I think it should be about here, so I'm going to put a clip there. And then when I take it off, I'll do the measurement and sewing stuff. Then I am noting the measurement of the seam to clip so that I know where the strap needs to be placed on the other side, and placing a clip on the other side. And then also measuring the length of the strap so that the straps can be even, and placing a clip on the second strap as well. So then I'm making a knot where that clip was placed, and I actually decided to do 2 knots, one a little bit lower, just in case the straps ever needed to be adjusted. I would have a little bit of length to work with. And then placing that into the dress and clipping it, and then I'm going to just hand sew it in place as I did on the front. Now the hem is looking a bit rough. I do like the shape that was created by the shapes that I used in my pattern, this kind of not perfectly rounded off hemline. So I'm just measuring and trying to figure out like how to make this even. I'm just measuring about to how high I know that I want it from trying it on and placing a pin, and then just trying to make that even all the way around before I go ahead and just cut that hem off. I did cut it a bit on the short side, so instead of doing a hem like I normally would on a skirt or dress where it's folded and hand stitched, I'm going to just serge around the edge. You could also just do a zigzag stitch. And then I folded and pressed a really tight hem that I'm just going to finish on the machine.